Those of us who haven't should spend time on their road also. The faith community, immigrant right activists, LGBTQ, and indigenous people will help us deepen our understanding, build our confidence and determination, and broaden our solidarity. I hope to see elected officials and their supporters at the bridge, because the day is drawing near when they could no longer sidestep this issue. In this region, talking about the New York metropolitan region, no politician who supports fracking and Indian Point nuclear plant should even think about running for office. Every legislative scorecard should include a candidate's position on climate issues. And of course, we must build political power outside of the two parties of capital. Climate change is also about economic inequality. The Koch brothers, the Waltons, and the fossil fuel corporations and financiers are our targets. And I think September 21st will strike a mighty blow against the 1%. Finally, the 1% brings me to Occupy Wall Street. But by that I mean mostly young activists. I don't believe any group can do more to build new bridges of understanding and forge new paths that my generation didn't even know existed. We must learn from them. I hope to see you all at the biggest and baddest climate protection march ever. Thank you.
Well, I think the panelists did a fantastic job. I mean, so let's go on. Sorry.
That's okay. You here? I'll be as brief as possible. I was stunned by the 83% of single women were the ones forced out of Katrina. That was a new one on me. We are, as you all know, we're with Brooklyn for Peace, which is not funded by the Koch brothers or Walmart or the Waltons. We rely entirely on the donations of our supporters, and we have some people who are sending around some cans and buckets right now, and we're hoping that you can dig deep and help us pay for the lights that are on and the flyers that are produced and all the rest of it, because we are now in our 30th year, and this is how we managed to survive for all these years. So dig deep, contribute what you can. And while that's happening, I wanted to make a couple of points. I was very pleased, well, pleased is not quite the right word, but I was struck by the Stern report and the issue of the refugees that are likely to be moving in this world in the event of climate change, which is going to happen. The estimates of the Stern report are that we're going to have 250 million climate refugees by 2050. And that is the conservative estimate. The less conservative one is 1 billion climate refugees on this planet. This means people will be moving and crashing into each other. The grievance wars that Michael Klare was talking about are likely to go up. And those migrations are happening already right now. We had in the news very much about 52,000 minor children are invading the United States. Well, in all the stuff that I heard, including from the liberals about, it's poverty, it's violence, nobody mentioned that Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador are locked into a terrible, deep, deep drought and being slammed by an El Nino. People are being driven off the land and there isn't any support, and that's one of the reasons why we have 52,000 minor children coming here. And when we were talking about food shortages and water shortages that are going to happen in the poor countries, I think most of us here have heard about what's happening in Detroit, where they're privatizing water, and it's hitting, of course, the poor communities, which are mostly African American, and they're having their basic drinking water cut off completely. Prices of water in Detroit have gone up 119% in the last 10 years. we're starting to see food price rises here too because of the deepening drought in the Southwest. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm sure a lot of this is not new information to many of you. I do want to take the time, while we're pushing the People's Climate March, to make three announcements. One, there's been a lot of publicity about Naomi Klein coming on Saturday night to the climate convergence, but there is another event that's taking place at the same time. It's called a Global Climate Treaty, Why the U.S. Must Lead. And it's got some amazing speakers. It's got Mary Robinson from the United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Change, Lester Brown from the Earth Policy Institute, Bill McKibben, Ambassador Marlene Moses from the Alliance of Small Island Nations, and among others, it has Sean Sweeney. I think that that's an event that many of us want to be at. It's hard to choose between the two, but my money is on Sean.
Financially,
Where is that?
It's at the Manhattan Ethical Culture, and I believe that Lisa DiCaprio has some flyers about it, and it's certainly online, and we're going to push it out to all of you who have signed your sign-up sheets. There's another thing that I want to highlight. I know all of you know about the climate convergence that's taking place on September 19th and 20th. There are apparently over 100 workshops now planned for Saturday. There is no schedule as yet, but I am told by Peter Rue, they're working on it. Yes, they're working on it. I heard that earlier today also. But it's supposed to be coming out by the end of this weekend. And there is one item there that I really want to draw people's attention to, because it's something that's close to me, close to my heart, close to something that Climate Action has been working on. It's called the Mapping Project, and this is carried forward by Sane Energy Project. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sane Energy, but Claire Donahue and her crew are a dynamic bunch. And over the last 2 years, they have put together a map of all the gas infrastructure in the Northeast. It is astounding, and they are going to unveil this map at the Climate Convergence in the Graffiti Church on September 20th at 12:30, from 12:30 to 2. And you can just get an idea there about what's happening with New York State not having any fracking. It's just filled with frack dump sites, frack pipelines, all kinds of things. The other thing I want to highlight is grab one of these little things which are on our table before you leave. Brooklyn for Peace is gathering to go into the march at Court Street in Montague at 9 o'clock on the 21st. We're going to join one of the 4 hubs. According to the conference call I was on today, there are going to be 4 pre-march rallies. One is labor, one is faith, one is the Peace and Justice Hub, and interestingly enough, one is the anti-nuclear power hub. Apparently the anti-nuclear power people do not want to be associated with anti-nuclear weapons, but hey. We have great speakers. We're going to have Bill McKibben, Medea Benjamin, Margaret Stevens from Veterans for Peace, Erica Violet Lee from Idle No More. It was the Idle No More, the Native peoples, the First Nations of Canada, that really lit a fire under the push against tar sands in Canada. And we've got some good entertainment. We've got Dar Williams, Emma's Revolution, all kinds of people are going to be there, a hip-hop group in Brooklyn, whose name I haven't written down. And then we're all going to step out together to the march. The thing is, we don't yet know where any of these rallies are going to be. Again, we're told maybe by next week we will have information. So it's a little upsetting. That's why Brooklyn for Peace is saying, meet us at Court Street in Montague, you know, where the farmers market is. I call it Cadman Plaza, but it's really Columbus Park. And we'll go in together, and we'll find wherever it is. We have the script from 86th Street to 60th for assembling. I think we're probably going to reach the 200,000 mark, maybe go beyond. And that is all I have to say. I'm going to turn the mic back to Sean and take your questions.
How long do we have? Till 9, right? I I'm going to just make a little list here. I can see a flurry of hands. I want to try to do a bit of gender balance, if that's okay. I see 3 male hands up at the moment. So we'll start with the brother here, and then Susan.
There we go. Gender balance. Fracking to be able to run. In fact, the union that you and I both work for and love supports, endorses Cuomo, and that illustrates one of the problems that 1199 is faced with a citywide, possibly a citywide strike. They're going to need the governor, they're going to need the revisions in the reimbursement rates, and they can't afford to reject him while supporting somebody who's better on fracking. My question is for Michael. What can you talk a little about the competition for land internationally? There's one of the greatest global land grabs going on all over the world, and how does that affect climate?
Rather than go back to the speaker straight away, let's take a round of questions because we don't have a lot of time. We can wait patiently to come to the conversation. Susan next, brother Redman, and then George.
Can you please explain what whoever is working on the organizing, what the convergence is, what the march is, what the overall program looks like? I've heard these things referred to in a number of different meetings, but I'm really not clear about which is presenting what, and if there's any ideological difference, or programmatic difference, or organizational difference.
Can I ask anybody who wants to come into the discussion quick to answer that question, do it right and give it back? I think Gloria might want to call Gloria.
Yes, the climate convergence is with a series of workshops and 2 plenaries Friday and Saturday night. Has been organized primarily by 2 groups, System Change, Not Climate Change, and the Global Climate Convergence. That is formed by Jill Stein, who was the former presidential candidate for the Green Party in 2012. And that is now having many different groups participating internationally and locally. There's a lot of politics in there, basically saying it's a systemic problem. It's addressing the issues of capitalism and around climate. The march, which is on Sunday, is primarily organized, although there are many, many, many groups now connected to it and kind of things going on around it, by 350.org, by Avaz, I guess, have the most, millions of dollars have gone into this march. The little bit of political statement, this is only my opinion, that describes the march on their website. We can thank Sean and a couple of other people here from the Green Party for that. Otherwise, the plan is there should not be much politics in it because it's a big tent and everybody will join in because of that. So it's really focused on marching, to see the world we want to see, to make. But there is no statement in making the statement to march. But that is only my opinion. But I have been involved in that.
Where is this program going to converge?
It's not. It'll be. You'll just have to go to Converge for Climate.
I'm very concerned about the fact that there are no real demands for this march. And I wonder if people can address what they think the demands should be. And also, I think that what this leads to is actually an opening for even corporations to come in and support us. So my question really is this, and I've been working on the march and I really support it, is it some type of counterproductive or counterintuitive? Why do we have this where we don't have any demands where people can understand that could unite us and unite people of color, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very concerned about that. And what demands would you suggest that a movement have?
If we have time, we'll come back. We have 3 minutes to get. I just want to make sure we get everybody right from the back there.
Yeah, I'm actually out here from Seattle. I was also arrested at the Keystone XL pipeline protest. There's a few of us. Thank you for bringing that up. But I really want to raise this question and put it out about what way forward, actually. What will it actually take to change everything? But I think everybody in the room is familiar with the state of things. The latest leaked IPCC report says we're close to the melting of the Greenland ice sheet, that this could become unstoppable. This is extremely serious, right? And I want to throw out, you raised this question of dialogue. We do need to stand together. We need to stop this, right? These summits have presided over a continual accumulation of greenhouse gases, an acceleration of it. They are not the solution to this. We are dealing with a system. We're dealing with a system that's not going to come to its senses. We need revolution, nothing less. I'm part of building a contingent. Capitalism is destroying the planet. We need revolution, nothing less. But I want to pose this question really for serious. We do need to really dialogue and debate over what are these, as we stand together, as we stand to stop this stuff and keep going forward. What will it take? Where do we go?
Will you accept fundamental change?
We get the irony, brother, in front of the camera.
No, would you accept fundamental change as an alternative?
2 or 3 minutes ago, I'll call one more man, Mike Sweeney, and if there's a woman who would like to speak, please.
Thank you. I really want to thank the panel. It was just terrific. Every single one of you contributed something else, and it was really, I'm really glad I came from the wilds of Manhattan. But we heard about the links between labor and the climate, and also the links between the peace movement and the climate. But I'm here representing U.S. Labor Against the War, which is trying to bring together all 3 of those strands within the labor movement to bring the labor movement into the peace movement and into the environmental movement, and to bring those movements into the labor movement. So we are committed to this. Sean said we have to keep going after the 21st of September. We're down to do that. We are working with 16 different locals here in New York City, and I'm just here to report that Stop the Wars, Stop the Warming is really something that the labor movement is taking up, and I'm glad that we're all here together. Thank you.
In 1989, I think there was a meeting at the UN when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of Great Britain in regards to climate change. That was 25 years ago. And we have managed now to come to this juncture where our planet is brinking on devastation. I wanted to know, what is it going to take? What is it truly going to take for us, as the 8 billion people on this earth, to try to do something about what is happening to us? Also, I would like to know how it is that you tie in GMO, genetically modified food, into what the destruction of the climate. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Quick question, Mike Sweeney. I worked with Eco-Socialist Horizons. Several years ago, 5 years ago, there was a number that was put out as a deadline for us, 2015. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a few groups and governments agreed this number of 2015 for a 90% carbon emissions reduction over the next few years. People argue about the numbers a little bit, but it's pretty clear 2015. And people talked a lot about that 5 years ago, but now we don't talk about it anymore because it's happening in 4 months. And Al Gore said a few years ago that I don't know why young people aren't lining up to block coal power plants. Right? That was Al Gore, who I'm not a huge fan of. But compared to what Al Gore said, a lot of what we're hearing about is things like divestment, like having a big in March as possible, things that are less than what Al Gore called for, things like all our solutions that we've been seeing. So I guess my question is if the movement isn't where it should be at, what are we going to do about it? Because we have 4 months. Because this movement has an expiration date. If we fail to prevent the passing of the tipping points, it'll be beyond human intervention at that point. So we have an expiry date. What are we going to do about the fact that the movement isn't where it needs to be?
about the actual summit of the UN being on the 23rd, I understand, and actually a few days after. I know there's a direct action plan for the 22nd, 23rd, but what is the People's Climate March and the Convergence plan to do actually when the UN is meeting? And the route of the march, I found really interesting and disappointing. I know it's being negotiated with NYPD, and that's problematic right there. But the way it goes in the U-turn, it really ends almost nowhere, and I'm not sure what the end is at Jacob Javits, if there's going to be any kind of sort of coming together for people. But I'm concerned about that because we're not actually, who are we talking to? And so what's going to happen when the UN is actually meeting? Is there or plans to put pressure on when people are meeting, even if there's a frozen zone by law enforcement around the UN?
Thank you for that, brother.
Yes. I just finished doing a lot of writing on the democracy deficit and on campaign finance after Citizens United. And it seems to lead to a tremendous problem for bringing about the change you want and need, which is that through donations, which seems to be totally what controls government policy, both parties will support the donors, which is the banks and the fuel industry. So what can you do in a policy standpoint to influence someone who will change the negotiating posture in reality for the ostensible democracies who are vital if you're going to get a worldwide policy change?
I'm seeing 8:42, so another 5 minutes for questions. Sure. Is that the will of the meeting? Going back to the panel? Is that right? Yes. Okay. Good. Okay. Okay. All right then. Okay. Who would like to take up the question?
Which some of the questions were very specific about the UN meeting. Why don't you start?
Maybe I'll jump back.
Michael said some of the questions were about the UN meeting. Of course, I didn't really make notes on what they were, but you can't hear? No. Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
I thought I was talking to you. My apologies. It seems loud up here. Yeah. I'm not sure what quite specific questions I need to answer because I can't remember some of them. So, there is the issue of the demands. Let's deal with this. This was already mentioned. Broad church approach. Everybody can bring their own demands. If you're with a group or an organization or you're part of a constituency, the feeling was that people will bring their own demands. But to sit down and have a discussion amongst a broad swath of organizations about what would be an appropriate set of demands would be time consuming and we need to get out on the streets. I'll just give a personal view. I took the view that we needed at least to say that we needed, we do need a global agreement it's based on science-based standards to fight global warming, reduce global warming pollution, and that's what Ban Ki-moon is calling for, so we should at least echo the organizer of the summit at a minimum. And so that was, eventually after a struggle, that was adopted by the host committee in New York. But it was a major battle. Some people just didn't want any demand whatsoever. I will take up one more point and I'll hand it over to the other panelists. What do we need to do? I can't remember who said that. It's actually what's the course of action? And I think my understanding of the whole discussion on climate and ecological sustainability over the last 10 years since I've been working on it is that yes, all of the technical solutions, more or less, in broad outline at least, exist. Renewable-based power, sustainable small food agriculture, small farm agriculture, different ways of doing transportation, low carbon mobility. There's loads of strategies, loads of options. The problem is when it's left to private markets and private investors to determine what options we choose, we're not going to get the ones we need. A, to reduce the emissions, B, to ensure adaptation and peace, and thirdly, we're not going to get levels of democratic input at the grassroots level and participation in economy that we need. So we really have to say solutions exist. Let's agree, let's find out what they are and build a political project, a party, a movement that actually fights for them in the electoral sphere and in the non-electoral sphere. It needs to be a multifaceted, multi-sided movement. So that's what I believe we should be sort of fighting for. And JJ echoed that in some of his comments. Anyway, I got too much of the mic here. Can I hand it over to Janet to take up the question?
Yeah, okay, and I'll stand up. Whoops, that definitely should be improved, maybe that.
Sorry.
Got it. So, yeah, I guess maybe I'll just segue right from, can you see me if I kind of sit down? From right there, I mean, yes, I think that, this broad 10 approach is, is interesting in the idea that it brings together the kinds of solidarity that JJ's talking about, and that's critical. It's not strong right now. I think that's part of why we don't have strong demands, because we don't necessarily trust each other yet. So this is a process. This is the practice run for building more trust, building a bigger tent, building a tent with stronger demands, and recognizing that we don't have time. But it's kind of like, excuse my language, tough shit. We have to do it anyway, because we're not going to win if we don't have those relationships built. So we have to do that. We have to take the time. And while we're doing that, because it's not just one strategy over another strategy, we have to be in a stance of resistance. So that means that people have to be, I believe, that people have to be actively, potentially breaking the law to stop the kinds of pollution, to stop the kinds of building of transmission lines, to stop, kicking people off of their land, to stop land takeover. So not only we have to be building relationships, we have to be asserting our relationships with the places that we live, with the land that we live on, with our families' health. I mean, we need to be doing both at the same time. I just want to add, in addition to the climate convergence and the march itself on the 21st, there's also a People's Climate Justice Summit that's being organized, anchored by the Climate Justice Alliance. So that's an alliance of 35 mostly grassroots frontline groups with some national allies like IPS. And that's going to be at the New School, and everyone's invited to that space as well. And that's where we're going to be highlighting grassroots voices of solutions, places where people are resisting and are building alternatives in their communities, and from here in the U.S., but also from around the world. So I would invite folks to come to that, and that website should also be up with the program by the end of the weekend as well. Again, People's Climate Justice Summit. So that's another space where people are going to be talking about what can we do today while we also are building a movement to push our leaders to make the kind of policy that we need. We don't have that political push today.
Michael, do you want to take a point?
Yeah. I'm also taken by this question, which way forward, the question of the day. And I think the way to answer that is to question what is causing climate change. And the answer to that is about 2/3 of the cause of climate change is the burning of fossil fuels. And the next largest percentage is agricultural causes, especially related to the production of food for meat consumption. Not just in this country, but increasingly in Asia. So basically, we will not stop climate change until we stigmatize the consumption of fossil fuels. And there is no shortcut to that. There is no alternative to that. There is no other way. The only way to stop climate change is to reduce and eventually eliminate the consumption of fossil fuels. So the strategy has to be to demonize, to stigmatize the consumption of climate change, and I think at some point the overconsumption of meat. Now we could talk about that. That is what is causing climate change, and you're not going to stop climate change until you eliminate those emissions. There is no other way. Now let me say more about this. It is not just, Western privatized corporations that are pushing this. Let's get real. It is state-owned companies, more even than private companies. It is the China National Petroleum Corporation, Sinopec, Gazprom, Rosneft, the Indian Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, Saudi Aramco, the Venezuelan PDVSA, and many other companies that are pushing this. Socialist, communist companies, Petro Vietnam, are equally involved in pushing fossil fuels on all of us. So until we make it unacceptable around the world to produce and to consume fossil fuels, we will not stop climate change. So you have to look at this like tobacco, like slavery. Those are the models that we have to look at, where it is unacceptable to put gasoline in your gas tank. And let me tell you, I did that today. So to come here from Massachusetts, took a train half the way, but there is no public transit from where I live to here. We have to eliminate the use of gasoline, of coal, of natural gas. There is no other way. So we have to build a movement to demonize, stigmatize, prohibit the consumption of those materials. And that has to be the way to do it. That's why I support the movement of divestment of fossil fuels. My college, Hampshire College, has divested. We're pushing that at my other member schools, Smith, Amherst, UMass, Mount Holyoke, and hundreds of other schools are pushing that because that says the problem is fossil fuels. These are dirty. These are contemptible. All these schools don't have tobacco stocks. They wouldn't dream of having tobacco stocks because that would blemish their reputation. That's the way this has to be presented. This is like slavery, like owning slaves. That's the way we have to go.
Yeah, I think it is possible to win reforms. I think the brother who talked about the fact that he doesn't believe that it's possible for us to make any significant difference or change under capitalism. You may be right, but the problem is so severe at this point. We are so close to the tipping point, as the brother over here talked about, is that we have no other choice. It would be years ago it would be impossible for many of us to, I don't want to go back as far as slavery, but we could talk about the rights of gay people to marry. We could talk about cigarettes, the sales of cigarettes and tobacco. I know I was talking not too long ago to someone who calls himself an eco-socialist. He said, look, you can do all you want about this whole climate change thing, but nothing's going to change until we have socialism. And I said,
That's not what I'm saying.
Oh.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not how you work.
Oh, okay, all right. The point I'm saying is that the problem is so severe. We have to build the capacity to build a movement that's broad enough, deep enough, strong enough to begin to still the hand of the corporations and the governments who are pushing fossil fuel. And I don't think there's nothing else we can do. We have to fight for these reforms. We can fight for socialism, as an ultimate goal, but we cannot wait on socialism. It'd be like telling anyone, you're not going to be liberated, you're not going to be free, you're not going to have your rights until we change the system. Yeah, I believe the system needs to be changed, but I believe there's things we have to do within that system, and in fighting for those changes within it, people might then begin to see that we have to go beyond that.
Can I respond?
No. The will of the meeting, I think, is no back and forth of that nature. I think we're winding up. Do you want to close? Okay. So
Are you guys willing to stay for a few more questions?
Yeah.
15 minutes.
All right.
Then let's do 15 minutes, and let's make sure that these are questions, not statements. Keep them short and to the point, and we'll take it from here. 15 minutes is about all we have.
Okay. Brother, please.
I'd like to know if anyone has any suggestions about breaking through all of the disinformation. A lot of people believe that a world that is quote-unquote green, using renewables, using resources, including human resources, to their best capacity, at their best use, is up in the clouds somewhere that we can't be there. It's actually here right now. and we could do it.
Oh,
And per what you had said, the reference to slavery. As you know, hundreds of thousands of black soldiers who left were critical to the victory of the Civil War. So the people have to be their own liberators. So we have to be our own liberators.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering about air travel. It seems to be a very pollution, something that's really very, very directly bad. And has anybody, I haven't, and I don't know of anybody who's really tried to deal with that problem.
Could you repeat that question so we can hear back?
The brother said about air travel being particularly bad. I think that was the main thing. Can I just give you a quick potion on emissions? I'll call on Nancy. And transport-based emissions is the fastest growing form of greenhouse gas emissions. But 75 to 80% of it is cars and trucks. And there's 60 million vehicles a year being produced right now. It stands to go up. And they're lasting longer. They may be more fuel efficient, but that doesn't matter. If you're bringing 60 million new ones and you're only retiring 30 million or scrapping 30 million, you've got a problem. And so there's a lot of environmentalists like to focus on air travel, and it's a big, serious problem. And it's growing 5% a year on average before the recession anyway. So I think all of this requires a mapping of where the emissions come from, what are the solutions, and how do we politically organise around making sure the solutions are administered. And the other quick point I would make on, this idea of system change and revolution, I'm totally with the program, don't get me wrong. But we have an economy that's been built up on fossil fuels for the last 150 plus years. And to get from where we are now to where we need to go takes planning, coordination, democratic input, and we can't just rely on slogans, leave the oil in the soil and the coal in the hole. That's very, very important as an organizing tool, but we need a program, we need a plan, and it may sound very old left and old school, but I think that's absolutely what we need. A sort of a socialist transitional program to make sure we move to where we need to be. So, Nancy.
On the food sovereignty movement globally. Here we call it the food justice movement. People sort of minimize its importance, but globally it's one of the largest people's movements, movements in the world. 250 million members of La Via Campesina in about 100 countries. So I'd like you to talk about that also in terms of what Michael was suggesting around land and water struggles. In my travels visiting food sovereignty projects in the Global South, they are the people themselves who are engaged in these projects are totally aware, live climate change every single day, and they're very anti-capitalist, and they're very, very, very poor. So I'd like to hear how we in the Global North can relate to that movement in the Global South and bring it together as a climate change project.
We'll come back to Nancy's question.
Yes, one thing we haven't spoken about that much yet is something that is a concern of mine is overconsumption, not just of meat, but in general. So many of our cheap goods are produced now in China. That's why China is now the #1 emitter of CO2, because that's where our clothes are being manufactured, the plastic goods are being manufactured, our electronics. Every year you have to get a new iPhone, every year you want to get a new whatever, something, pair of shoes. And how do we have strategies to tackle that? I mean, in the developed countries, I know developing countries
that came up because, as the questioner correctly pointed out, China is now the biggest producer, emitter of carbon dioxide and climate greenhouse gases. And as the commenter made correctly, a lot of that is our own exported emissions, because we buy things from there. By the way, the U.S. coal industry is also exporting coal to China and wants to do more of that. And natural gas, when the fracking industry is able to get permission to build more LNG terminals to export LNG, natural gas from fracking, they want to sell it to China. So we will be exporting, so that has to be part of the struggle too. But this goes back to what JJ was saying about solidarity, because if we're going to stop climate change, the most important force in the world is going to be the Chinese people, not us. They're the ones who are going to have to stop this, because their government is now the leading force behind climate change, not us anymore. Sad to say, this is nominally communist government. I agree that it is a communist government with capitalist tendencies. But nonetheless, there you have it. That's a dilemma that we have to face. But the Chinese people, if you talk to them, that is not the ones in power, but the ones who struggle to breathe every day, are immensely aware of the price they pay for fossil fuel-driven growth. And they're increasingly prepared to erupt in mass protests, which we rarely hear about, but which bring tens of thousands of people in the streets daily in China. And this is where we have to have solidarity, is global solidarity of the climate action, anti-fossil fuel movement. That is the answer, ultimately.
I'm going to, I think, hand the mic back over to Martha to close out, but just one last personal word. It was asked, what have we enjoyed about this whole experience? I think that was the question. I actually find, I got personally, and I think I can speak for everybody on the panel, and perhaps many in this room who've been involved in it, this is a strange time in terms of, it's the worst of times, which I hate to be Dickensian about this, but it is the opposition against anything. We're talking about the future of the planet, the future of human civilization. It's the biggest challenge the human species have ever faced. We know the enemy is stronger than it's ever been, and yet we also know that people are talking about it in ways that they wouldn't have done a few years ago, that we are talking about system change. We are talking about building movement. This will be the next great movement. And the future of the human civilization will depend on whether we're successful or not. So let's all get involved in the struggle, have a good time, and make sure we win in the end of the day, because we just have to. It's as simple as that.
I think that's it for tonight. I want to thank you all. I know people talk about hope all the time, and you've taken away hope, particularly after Michael's presentation. I feel sort of down. But here's my response to that feeling that's often put forward. 2 years ago, when I became involved with the fracking movement, nobody in fracking was talking about climate change. Not a word. All they cared about was drilling and get rid of these oil rigs all over my land and all the rest of it. Now they are all talking about climate change. Everybody is. And I think I see this movement developing, but where we're going to see the real fire of the movement will be, as Samir Amin says, in the periphery, not in the center. We will learn from the periphery. We will see, just as it was the slaves who made slavery impossible, and the black people of the United States who rose up against Jim Crow, and the women who demanded power, and the gays, one group after another. We're going to see it from the developing nations. We're going to see it from the poor, because they are the ones whose backs are to the wall. One final note on hope. Those who follow my Facebook page know that I have a thing about monarch butterflies, which are 90% extinct at this point. And I've started a movement to plant swampweed, milkweed. And I just want to announce that today I saw my 4th monarch butterfly. That's it. Thank you all for coming. It's been great. The speakers have been wonderful, and so have you.